you are more than what happened to you.
So before we get into it, let's crack our claws. Raina's claw was cracked.
I already cracked it. I'm drinking.
So we have a content warning for listeners today. Today's episode discusses childhood sex abuse, and if this is a topic that is triggering for you, we invite you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. If that means listening to a bit and taking a break, that's totally fine. We think these issues are important to talk about, and so we will talk about difficult things on this podcast from time to time. We invite you to just listen as you can, take breaks, and take care of you. Also, if this is an issue that has impacted your life and you need some extra support around it, we want to make sure you know the phone number for the National Sexual Assault Hotline, which is 1-800-656-4673. You can also find wonderful and very supportive resources at rainn.org. That's RAINN.org. So, having said all of that, our guest this week is an incredibly courageous woman. Her name's Courtney, and she came on to share her story of surviving childhood sex abuse, and it was incredibly powerful for us to get to listen to and talk with her about, I think.
Yes.
What do you think?
No, absolutely. I feel she was very brave to come on and share her experiences as well as her journey to healing, and definitely a topic that is uncomfortable to talk about on many levels, but is very common, and we need to talk about this shit. We need to release the stigma attached to those who have been abused and allow the space for them to talk.
I agree, because the only people that we protect by not talking about it are the people who are perpetrators, the people who are causing harm. And making this a taboo topic hurts the survivors, and it just increases and enhances shame that's already there. So personally, I'm really proud of this episode. I'm really proud of the conversation. I'm really proud of Courtney.
Yeah.
And we hope you all enjoy it and get something out of it, so let us know.
All right, here we go. Here's Courtney.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Don't Talk About It podcast. Raina and I are really honored today to welcome our guest, Courtney. Courtney and I are from the same hometown. Our siblings were actually like best friends growing up. So we've known each other for a long time. And Courtney's joining us today to talk about a really vulnerable topic, to talk about her experience with childhood sex abuse. And so I want to start by just saying thank you. We can't thank you enough for being willing to step into this space with us and talk about something that is really vulnerable and also really does need to be acknowledged and talked about so much more than it is.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on, Courtney.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate what you two are doing with your podcast. I think it's really important to give people the space to talk about the things that we're not supposed to. So
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is definitely one of those topics that I think a lot of people may experience, but don't usually talk about, or have the space to talk about, or feel ashamed about talking about these things. So what you're doing today is very brave of you. And just from the very get-go, just thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So I guess we actually wanted to start by asking what made you want to come on and share your story? Because you have I think it was like the first week we launched, you messaged me, you were like, hey, if you ever want a guest, I would love to come tell my story. And I think that's beautiful because so often survivors have so much shame put on them that they don't want to talk about it. And I was like, whoa, okay, yes, I would love to have you on. And it surprised me because of, I guess, just my misperception about what survivors want to do. So why is it important to you to share your story?
I just think that with my experience and through healing and everything, it's really important to let survivors know that they are, they're valid, they deserve to be heard, their story, they deserve to have the help that they might need in healing. Um, and I didn't really have a voice growing up. It was taken from me. And
Mm-hmm.
I think getting it out there and telling my story will help survivors, and do whatever they need to do to heal. And also let them know that, you can become something, you can do whatever you want to do in spite of what may have happened to you in the past,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that you can.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Yes.
you're not the sum total, the whole of you as a person is not the trauma.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard. It's hard for, victims of abuse to overcome that and to really step into acknowledging that they didn't deserve it and that they can move on and they can heal. And not move on, but I
Right.
mean you can overcome it, and you can, you know, um, have the tools and resources that you need to prevail every day, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like, just to speak on what Megan and you both were saying, we are not what happens to us, we are who we choose to be, every day. So, um, so when you do have a choice in how you want to, whatever did happen, you have a choice to what am I going to do with this? Am I
Right.
going to, of course, be sad and it's so fucked up and, but then also, how long am I going to choose to suffer for this, and then go into
Exactly.
the healing. And of course, it comes in waves, as all things do, but like working through it rather than like, like you said, like corrected
Exactly.
yourself about not moving on from it, but just learning to like live through it. And it's just something that'll probably most definitely be a part of you for the rest of your life, um,
Absolutely.
but choose
Absolutely. It is.
not let it define who you are, So I think that's great.
Exactly. And of course, the old, whatever it is, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something freeing about being able to, say there was an episode when Megan was talking about, standing up to her abuser and
Mm-hmm.
saying, no, you raped me. And there's power behind that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sorry, I hope that's okay that I brought that up.
Yeah, of
I
course.
Of
know.
course. Yes. Yes. No, I mean, I think that's so important that we do hold the power. We always have
Yeah,
power. Like it's always within us somewhere, so just finding that again is everything.
Yeah, it's that thing too of like, we're not the ones that did something wrong.
Mhm.
Like the person
yeah,
harmed you is the one that did something wrong, and yet we carry the burden of their shame as survivors.
forever.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's beautiful to see you so free
Thank
now.
you. Yeah.
So can you tell our listeners what happened?
Sure. I mean, I think the best way without really going into detail and everything is just, I was sexually abused from the time that I was 9 years old until about 17, really, when I left for college, by my biological father. And
Mhm.
so my parents were divorced. My mom, had no clue, obviously,
Mhm.
what was going on. I was really the only one that was still close with my biological father that really went over there and spent the shared custody time with him. And, it basically happened every single time I was there and every night that I was there in some different capacity.
Oh, it's
Um,
horrible.
so it's unfortunate. He stripped, my childhood away from me. I didn't
Mhm.
I mean, 9 years old to 16, they're very formative years.
Yeah.
It's, you're developing and maturing and finding life. And so, yeah, it was a very, very rough time. Very rough time. I'm fortunate to have overcome and end up where I am.
It also must have just, what a heavy burden to have to figure out how to carry as a child.
Yeah. It makes me sad too. It makes me sad for that little girl. And I know we're going to get to it a little bit later, but that's one of the reasons why I ended up, reporting my abuser, and he ended up in prison. So, but I think another, to touch on one of the first questions you asked, is um, it's important for survivors to know that it's okay to fight for that little person that you know that they once were. So, and to
Yeah.
stand up for them. And I said that in feeling deserving of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually something that we did want to ask you about, because your story is unique and that you disclosed what you told, and pressed charges. And a lot of people don't do either, or do one but not the other. The justice system is so fucked up in the way that it
Yes.
people who are experiencing abuse, and sexual abuse, physical abuse, like it's awful, and so it takes quite a lot to go through that. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about how you disclosed, and then just sort of the story of what happened, how you got to the point of actual like prosecution.
Right. So it started in college. I When I started to kind of come to terms with what had happened to me and start to really face it, I was very, I would disassociate. It was buried really deep. I always thought, oh, when he dies and everybody know, like, it's just when he dies and everybody knows, everything will make sense, everything. Some of the relationship issues that my mother and I had, between each other because of it. But basically, coming back to it, when I was in college, I was going to be a teacher. That's what I wanted to do. And I ended up taking a social work course, and I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I want to do social work instead. So I switched my junior year, in the middle of my junior year,
Oh man,
to
that's a
social
big
work.
change. Yeah.
But in one of the courses that we took, it was, a topic, and I ended up writing a paper, and I lied in the paper. I said that it was a different family member, like a grandfather or something, and didn't identify who it was, but I was getting closer to, disclosing and coming to terms with it. And I got a counselor and or a therapist, and started going to therapy, and I ended up disclosing to her who it actually was. Um, and then I lost my job. Our grant program was taken. And I ended up moving back to Tucson. So I lost my therapist, essentially, moved back to my hometown, and took care of my grandma. And about a year later, I met my ex-husband. And whole story for another time, but we got into a fight one night, and he basically was like, asking me what was wrong with me. Not to say that this was in any way right of him, or a healthy relationship, but he basically was like, why can't you trust me? Like, why can't you trust anyone? And I said it. I said it out loud for the first time ever. I was like, I was sexually abused. It was a really long time, all through childhood. And he pushed to ask me who it was, and I just came out with it. And then he must have said something to my mom, because she took me to lunch like a few days later, and she asked me, she straight up asked me if it was him. And I told her everything at lunch, everything that had ever happened.
Sure.
And she did pretty well, I think, for someone that, I mean, you don't know how to take that. I mean, she was probably dealing with a I know she was dealing with a whole bunch of her own emotions surrounding it. She, she couldn't believe it, how she didn't see it or know that it was happening. And I think it can be like dominoes. Like I think hindsight's always 2020. There was a lot of emotion and feeling with it. But she did ask me if I wanted to press charges, and I wasn't sure. And she gave me my space to make that decision. And a couple of days later, I decided to. And the process is interesting. I know Meg was saying the justice system is fucked in that it is.
Yeah.
You have to make a report first with a police officer. So essentially, no matter what, you have to tell your story at least 2 times, and repeat everything and try to give as much detail as possible. I mean, I was 16 when it ended, and 23, I think, when this was all going down, maybe a little bit older. It wasn't that long ago, so maybe 10 years ago, so 26. Anyway, I so I made the report with the police, and they immediately go to interview them, the um, suspect, if you will, and he admitted enough of something to be arrested.
Oh,
So
wow.
he said something, um, and so he was arrested, and then they built a case. They had me bring we had these handbook like calendars in high school, and I would write like every time I was at his house, or I would put like all my social stuff in. They were like memory books for me. Like I would spent the night at, so they knew where I was every time. So from those and my interview and everything, they had enough to charge him with 36 counts. He didn't really fight it, which was amazing. Like I can't imagine what it would be like for me to have had to go to trial.
Okay, so
And
you
sit
didn't have to
front.
go to trial.
I didn't have to actually go to trial. The judge sentenced him as much as she possibly could, and
Wow.
I love her. I love this judge.
Yeah. Gosh, that's incredible, and lucky that you got a good judge.
Yes.
And
a great prosecutor. He was wonderful.
Yeah. I just was kind of finding myself wondering, like, what was how did you get through that, like, emotionally? Because you're like able to like tell the facts, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm curious, maybe for others who are thinking about pressing charges or are in a similar spot, like what helped you get through that part, like the legal part of it,
Right.
and emotionally, because that it's such a toll. Like you have to, like your point about you have to keep telling the story to strangers a bunch of times. Like even that in and of itself is so re-traumatizing.
Yeah, and then just also being validated or just discovering the magnitude of what had happened to you,
Sure. Yeah.
and like saying it out loud and seeing people's reactions and,
Right. I mean, saying it out loud makes it real, right? I
yeah.
mean, it's a hard thing to do. Therapy.
Mhm.
I know everyone here, big proponents of therapy.
Yes.
I, I can say that was a time when my ex was there for me. That I had my family. I had a wonderful support system. There was a little bit, it was hard. It was a tough time. I was very lucky that for work, I was taking care of my grandma, and I was running like an after school program. So it was like really fun things that to me didn't take too much emotional labor. So I could direct all of my attention to that and my therapy. And I read books during the time. I think books and podcasts have helped me. I've been through a traumatic time recently, getting divorced, and I think therapy is always my number one, but and then your personal self-care, like what is important to you. I think it's really hard when your childhood was stripped away from you like that,
Mhm.
to be okay with finding yourself and what makes you happy and what puts you at ease and what your your healthy coping mechanisms are going to be.
Mhm.
Um, and it's always work. Like it will never end. So I did get through that rough time, and it's like a roller coaster,
Mhm.
and it's a process, and it always will be.
Yeah.
So I hope that answered it a little bit. I think, self-care, music, yoga, exercise,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
have a dog.
I was gonna ask, what are your, so I sometimes in my practice, I work with very traumatized people and we talk about coping skills. And I like the frame of like coping skills that have a high cost, drugs, alcohol, self-harm. Those are high cost coping skills.
Right.
And then low cost coping skills like baking, reading, writing. So I've like moved away from the frame of like healthy and unhealthy because it's all just survival.
Right. I like that.
Mhm.
But I'm
Yeah.
curious, like,
Thank
what
you.
are the ways that you learned to, like, the lower cost ways that you learned to care for yourself or cope?
So, well, they're based on the high cost ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in college, I drank. I drank a lot. I had a buddy that we would go out 4 nights a week and drink. And when I was 22, I got a DUI. And that was right when I was starting to kind of, you know, um, start to begin to heal and tell my story. And
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
so that was not me. I mean, I had never been in trouble before. And I was lucky enough that it didn't actually end up, I wasn't charged with DUI or anything, but it was a traumatic experience.
Mhm.
And so, from that moment, I had quit drinking. And I stayed completely sober for a year or two. And now that I'm, able to cope with it and stuff, I'm fortunate enough to be able to, have healthy drinks and stuff like that. That's not one of the low cost ones I was saying,
Yeah.
but what goes hand in hand with it is that I was addicted to food, and I was protecting myself from being attractive to
Mhm.
anyone by having weight on, and I was heavy and big, and I just always protected myself with that
Mhm.
um cloak of armor with actual weight, and food, and filling the emptiness with food, and and so I actually lost 115 pounds, and
Mm-hmm.
one of my low cost is working out. Like now I have
Mhm.
to run. Like I I
Mhm.
I can feel it when I don't, yeah, work out. I get
Yeah.
more anxious. That's one of my fun diagnoses from my
Mhm.
past trauma. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, I have anxiety, and running is what really helps me cope with that, which is awesome. I was a swimmer in high school, and so I when I
Yeah.
can do that and hiking and just being outdoors. But music, I mean, music is therapy to me too. Listening, I wish I could play something, but yeah. So some of those, I think, like you have mentioned and we've said, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be something that I have to manage
Mhm.
and cope with. And so finding those low cost skills are important. So I have several. I mean, I read. Sometimes it's just taking my son and dogs for a walk
Mm-hmm.
if I'm feeling, like I'm crawling out of my skin or something. So
Just the theme of anxiety comes up a lot in this
yeah,
podcast, both like when we're just
yeah,
talking to each other and then with our guests as well.
Yeah.
So you're not alone in that at all.
No,
Not at
no,
all.
not at
yeah.
all. Um, do you recall, um, I'm sorry to like bring it back, but during those years, do you remember how you coped then? during the years that
So,
things were going on?
yes. So I was the queen of like disassociating
Mm-hmm.
and not I'm definitely an empath. And so I always, took on a lot of my surroundings and stuff. But no, I didn't cope at all.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't face it.
Yeah.
Um, but some of the behaviors that would come out because of it are like for some reason the next day in school I would exhibit as like just being really hyper and like over the top, like overcompensating, being like happy and
Everything's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like I was racing. Like people would be like, "Oh, she's so bubbly," but it's, it's a trauma response. Like
Yeah.
I was, trying to cope with what was happening and ignore it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was very racy. My thoughts were very racing, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I yeah, I think I just always overcompensated by not necessarily projecting onto others, but letting everybody else show me who they were, share their feelings, fixing everybody else, so that I didn't have to deal with it or fix
Yeah.
it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
always been a very compliant kid. Like I
Hmm.
never, stirred up stuff. In middle school when it first started happening, I was mean. I was a bully and a jerk, and I've apologized. There's three particular women who I was not nice to, and I've apologized in my later
Hmm.
years. Not
Wow.
that it's an excuse or anything, but um, I was going through a lot. Middle school sucks, and I was, I was getting in with the group that, accepted me,
Hmm.
and I wasn't nice. So
Yeah.
there were ways I coped that weren't great. But,
Yeah.
I think as a child, like you shouldn't be expected to have to do
Totally.
that.
Totally. Yeah. I was just more interested only because of other people see this amongst children or change in behavior in any sort of way, always
Yeah.
ask like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
usually there is a reason why kids will be mean, or
Yes.
be promiscuous or just like sudden changes in behaviors, like you used to be a really sweet girl, like now
Yeah.
you're so mean to everybody, like ask, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really hard, and I think it's tough as a parent to discern what is you're maturing, you're going through puberty, so you have your hormones
sure,
and
sure.
all of that stuff. But I think that's been something that's really hard for my mom
Mm,
to accept and come to terms with and deal with is the hindsight's. I mean, she
totally.
now it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's why, and oh my God, like everything makes so much sense now.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's very, very hard because as a victim or, as a survivor, I was really trying to protect my family. I mean, my brother and sister had this person as their dad. I knew that my mom would be crushed
Hmm.
if she ever found out. And there were some other things that, they do in the grooming process, and that you as a survivor kind of blame yourself and think that you're complicit in this, and you're
Hmm.
not. You're a child, you can't make those decisions. You're
Right.
you're not developed to make
Yeah.
those decisions. But um, yeah, I think there was a point to what we were saying, but yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm
it's
sure it's tough for the parents and everything, but I think
yeah,
the more we talk about these things, the more open people may be to like, oh, this could
yes,
be like it could be my husband. You know what I mean? Like it could fucking happen. Um, and not saying that your mom did anything wrong, but
right.
just being more aware that that this does happen, and it could be like the guy or the perpetrator could be totally like, I would never even guess, you know what I mean? Because they're
Yeah,
whatever, he's such a great guy, It's
Right.
like,
Oh,
well,
absolutely. And I think that there are a number of personality disorders that go hand in hand with pedophilia, but
yeah,
not to say that everyone that has a personality disorder is a
right,
pedophile,
Yeah,
but
I
right.
got you.
I mean, and this particular one is absolutely narcissist. I mean, he had a narcissistic personality disorder, couldn't take accountability for anything. And there's a lot of trauma and stuff that goes into that with my mom being his partner.
Mhm.
And then, they had split up when it started happening. And I know Megan, as a therapist, you know the, psychology behind a number of things, but um, that sometimes tends to be when it starts happening. And then they, start abusing the child in a fucked up way of either getting back at that person or um, whatever it may be, like to validate themselves or to whatever. But
Yeah.
it's fucked up. But
So
yeah, I
hard.
mean, there's just there. It's layered, and
Mhm.
there's so much to it.
There's so much, especially when it goes on through like your developmental years, because
Yeah.
everybody fucking always reverts back to their high school days, like there's something
Yeah.
around that time of like our lives that everybody always, like where's their fucking Letterman's jacket, or
Oh,
that time I
Right.
ran a
yeah.
touchdown in high school, like that type of shit,
And
or
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I
high
needed to
school,
have that.
yeah,
Right.
prom king, prom queen, everybody like talks about this stuff, but that how they were in high school. So it's just
Right.
for some reason that energy and those memories like carry on with us throughout life. And I mean, kudos to you for like one, pressing charges, and calling that shit out, and going through with it, and you had the support from your mom and from your family and everybody, to help you and guide you through that. So
Yeah. And I forgot to mention this, but there there was a little girl who went missing in our town around the time that I had reported, and her picture, one of her pictures came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I had that hair style when I was a little kid, and she kind of looked like me. And I think that was really a triggering point for me, was
mm,
like, what if he's the one that took her, or
mm,
or like, what if he does this to somebody else? He was remarried at the time, and I know that their like stepson or somebody was having a baby, and it was just, I just didn't want it to happen to anybody else, and I wanted to stand up for that
yeah.
child who didn't get to have that experience, and who, when I look
Yeah.
back, I remember high school in a totally different, like you were saying, a different
Mhm.
way than other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, can we shift to talking a little bit more, as we've been talking about kind of all along, about the healing process?
Yeah, definitely.
We're real big on that on this
Yes.
podcast, healing and growth.
Mhm.
So, you've mentioned therapy.
Yeah.
Um, what kind of therapy have you found helpful, and just what has been like the most helpful in your process to heal?
So EMDR,
Mhm.
big fan. I used EMDR for therapy regarding my childhood sexual abuse, as well as my divorce, and I love EMDR.
Can you explain
And
what
then
MDR, sorry,
Yeah,
EMDR is?
because the way that trauma memories are stored is in the part of our brain that understands emotion.
Mhm.
And with trauma that persistently bothers you and gives you PTSD, it doesn't get moved into your working memory. And that's why when you're triggered, it feels like it's still happening,
Mhm.
because it's stored in a part of your brain that understands emotions and pictures, but not in the prefrontal cortex, where we have like the ability to think logically about things.
Mhm.
So EMDR basically helps create like new neural pathways for the trauma, and kind of takes it out of the emotional, like limbic system part of the brain, and moves it into working memory.
Mhm.
So the memories are less distressing. Like you still have them. It's,
Mhm.
some people think like, oh, this will make me forget the bad thing that happened. It doesn't. But it makes it less distressing, and especially for like childhood trauma, it allows you to have like a more adaptive, more adult perspective on it. So that the thought is no longer like, I'm a bad person, I'm shameful, I'm unlovable. Like it helps kind of undo the negative thoughts that we have about ourselves, that
Like the
trauma brings
feeling
us.
that is attached to that.
Yeah. Some
Right.
I'll describe it, or I've had it done on myself, and it feels for me like the memories that I worked on with it, instead of being like in Technicolor, it's like a faded black and white photograph, and the emotion,
Yeah.
it lacks the emotional charge that it used to have.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that sounds great.
I
I mean, it
agree.
makes perfect sense, because like usually when we do get triggered, we elicit an emotional response of feeling, like actual physiological responses, you know, heart racing, sweating, like claw hands, like
I
all of
do
the things.
this.
Yeah, like sweaty, all the things. And so
Yeah.
if you could then like become aware of those, that trigger, and you're like, oh, this is what's going on right now, and then talk yourself through this, like, no, but I'm here, I'm 40 years old, Raina, you know, and you're not this little girl anymore, you know what I mean? You're
Right.
fine, that little girl's okay, and she's safe, and things like that. I mean, that's just, I mean, I've never done EMDR, but
Yeah.
this is what I'm getting
That's
to
it.
take from it,
Yeah.
because I've definitely been triggered and I know what that feels like. So I can only
Right.
imagine like taking away that emotional charge with it, along with it, you know.
Right.
So
And
that's a
you, I
great
mean,
thing.
you spoke to feeling safe, and one of mine, feelings were because you pick kind of a feeling to work through during your sessions, and not deserving that, or being deserving of having a normal, or a childhood.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
therapy helped. EMDR was the kind of therapy that did it for
Yes.
you. What else? What else was helpful in your like path home to yourself?
So depression medication definitely helped me through that. I'm fortunate enough to I'm not using medication now. I'm working out and stuff, but I'm not never opposed to ever going back if that's something that I need in the future. So yeah, I mean, medication, talk therapy, always. It's regular self-care for me. Um, being open, sharing my story, talking about it, fighting for the little girl I was, and all the other children or people out there who are in, situations like this, and who deserve to have their story told, and shine despite what happened.
Definitely.
So,
That's beautiful.
aw.
Yeah, I mean, your story definitely, you know, when Megan told me that you wanted to come on the show and share your story, I thought it was a beautiful and brave thing for you to do, and also so just important. And the intention behind sharing your story, you know, what you wanted to gain from it, overall, is to help others, you know, which is,
Absolutely.
yeah, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. You know, with anything that we talk about, is hoping to like create awareness and take the shame away from all of this shit, that, you know, you don't have to carry this. It's not shameful, you know,
Yeah.
what has happened to you or to anyone, you know. So
Awareness is key. I mean, so it doesn't take survivors 10 years, or to endure 7 years and then wait another 10 years, or I just think, yeah, making it less hush hush about things, and minimizing it, and just really blowing it up, and making people aware that it
yeah,
does happen, and it
totally.
can happen to anyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I was debating whether or not, you know, I've touched on it through other episodes and things like that. And I was debating whether or not I was going to share anything here on this episode with you. But, you know, through listening to you, I can only just like relate so much with so much that you're saying, that I'd be like, it wouldn't be right for me not to like share that. You know, similar experiences, you know. So,
sorry. Yeah.
I mean, it took a long time for me to start the healing process, you know, like just a few years ago. So I'm still just like really in it. But yeah, there is a lot. And we should talk about it more often, you know, and, you know, and people will listen, you know, the right ones will. So thank you so much for coming on today.
You're so welcome, and I'm very proud of you. It's
Thank you.
so hard to take that first step.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it really it's hard. I mean, because and you've talked about this on the podcast before, but other people have emotions surrounding it too.
Yeah.
And when, you know, and you deserve to have your emotions and everything addressed and to work through it yourself without having to manage other people's emotions. But that is one of the fears, I think, with coming forward is what is everyone going to think, and the shame and everything. So
Yeah.
kudos. I mean, you're amazing for what you're doing.
Thank
Healing
you. You're amazing for what you're doing.
I'm gonna move to Oregon and hang out with you guys, with you girls.
I just think, you know, what
Or is
I've
that? I
learned.
don't even know where you are, but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, we're in Portland. We're in Portland.
Okay.
Yeah. I just think the biggest things that I've been learning throughout my recovery, or not even recovery, healing process is that it's okay, because I'm definitely an empath as well, and always have been. You know, I'm a nurse, and it's like it's okay to put myself first. You know, it's okay to put boundaries up and like do what I need to do to take care of myself. And like at the end of the day, like I have to live inside my brain. You know, I have to live inside those thoughts and things and try to get through those on my own sometimes. And so it's okay to say no. It's okay to take care of yourself, and you know, whatever you need to do has been. And like even like not even talk to certain individuals because you just can't, you know what I mean, just whatever you need to do to take care of yourself and through your whole process, because it's fucking hard. It's so hard to face shit that you stuffed down for so long. And when things start coming up and coming out, you know, that's why I like that my tattoo is like, she's not breaking, she's opening, because I feel like I'm not breaking down, you know, I'm not broken. You know what I mean?
No, you're not.
I'm
You're
just
not.
opening up like what that little girl that was like hiding in there, you know, for so long, just trying to be safe. Like I'm like finally like, oh,
Yes.
you're safe now. You know, you can come out and play and be fun and like free. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here and inspiring me to be a little bit more open about, you know, my childhood sexual abuse. You know, just fucking name it. And and it was is different than yours, and I mean, we all have our own stories, you know, so none of them are, you know, the same, except for I will say that we all kind of carry that same, I feel like we all carry that same hurt and shame and fucking like unworthiness, or feeling like not deserving of, or all of those fucking negative things, because you're a kid growing up and you're being taught these things for the very first time, and like this is it, you know, like first impressions are fucking everything, you know. So it's hard to like change that pathway like you're doing an EMDR of like associating this with that, you know, like because they're so like grained in there.
Yes.
No.
And I will warn people, it's not easy.
Mm-mm.
EMDR, you need to be in a space in your life where you can manage and you're able to get through these feelings and have a good therapist that does
Yeah.
it with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted
No,
to.
and
But
none
yes,
of this is easy at all.
yeah,
And if I mean, but that's what I always say. It's not easy, but it's fucking like what we get out of it by going through it. Because for so long I didn't feel anything, you know, like had no emotion, no feelings, no whatever. You know, I was a fucking mean girl in high school
yeah,
for sure. But what I'm getting out of healing is like being more loving, you know, like being able to give love, and again, be on this fucking podcast or have a podcast, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have done this without like really tapping into like who I am, you know, like discovering who I am.
Definitely.
So
Yeah. And thank you for your platform and what you do. I think
mhm.
I said that already, but with the podcast, it's yes, and giving people, the space to make others aware of all of the fucked up shit in our world.
Yeah. Yes. And
So
how
I
we're
think
all
that's a deal.
here, you know, we have all of our own shit. Um, and um, and it's important to like acknowledge that you don't know what's going on in somebody's life, you know. So be kind
Absolutely.
to one another. And don't like, you know what I mean? Like I always
Yeah.
say, like um, I there's like this saying, like I can see a lot of or what is it saying? I could see a lot about a person or I know a lot about a person by what they choose to see in me, you know, because I feel like a
Mhm.
lot of it is projection, you know, when somebody is mean or angry or lashing out at you or super judgmental, like I always take it as like there's must be something going on under there, you know what I mean? Because I know that I used to be like that, and there was a lot going on
Right.
under there, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Um,
I absolutely agree with that. It's important to set boundaries and not let people treat you a certain way and
mhm,
have excuses for them. But yes, there are plenty of times that we don't know what's going on with people. And
yeah. So always just be kind and talk, fucking talk about
yes.
it, talk about
Well,
it.
I just want to say thank you to both of you for your vulnerability on this topic.
Mhm.
Um, I know it's not easy, and
Yeah.
I feel so lucky I get to know the two of you, and I feel so um, in awe to like be in the presence of like the courage that it takes to name these things, to say them out loud, to talk about it, because I know that there will be other people listening to this episode who have a similar experience. And by talking about it in this way, you are giving a gift to others. And it's just incredibly generous of both of you.
Well, thank you, Megan.
Oh, and I'm gonna cry again.
Oh
But yes,
no.
thank you.
Well,
Oh,
is there any other like advice or anything that we didn't get the chance to talk about or didn't ask about that either of you want to put out there around this topic, either for people who are also survivors of childhood sexual abuse, friends and family, or just like anything that's like, oh, that's important and we didn't say it yet. We should make space for that.
I think just for any survivor out there, it's never too late to stand up for yourself in whatever way you want to do it.
mhm.
If you only want to go to a mountaintop by yourself and shout what happened to you, then do that. If you want to put them in prison and wage, your war and everything, then do that. But it's never too late, and you deserve to stand up for that child that, or that person that may have lost in trauma, and
Mhm.
that it's okay to heal in whatever way you're going to with the low cost coping mechanisms, and
Mhm.
in a way that's going to fulfill your life and help you to progress and have a fulfilled life.
Yes, for sure. And just to add to all of that is, you know, you definitely, for any survivors listening to this, and I'm speaking to myself and speaking to you, Courtney, as well, you are so deserving, you know, of all that this life, you know, of all the love, all the joy, um, all the success, all the everything, you know, like this should not take anything away from what somebody did to you, should not take anything away from who you are, you know. So you are so deserving of love, and you're worthy. Um, it was not your fault. And um, yeah, again, we are not what happens to us, you know.
Exactly.
So
It was not your fault, and we are not what happens to us. Definitely.
No, we are so much more than that.
Yeah,
So
definitely. And we need to change our society and our culture surrounding a lot of this.
for sure.
Yeah.
Rape culture and lots of stuff.
Yeah, it's so fucking common, but nobody wants to talk about it, or nobody wants to fucking believe you, because that means they have to invest some energy into that, So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
don't let anyone take that from you, though.
no, mm-mm,
It's
no,
your voice and your story.
absolutely, yes.
All right. Well, Courtney, thank you so much.
You're so
Yes,
welcome.
Wonderful
Thank you.
job.
Thank you.
And
Such a brave thing to do.
Oh, thank you.
Using your voice, I love it.
and thanks again to everybody listening today. Once
Mhm.
again, if you find yourself feeling activated by the content of this episode, or if you find yourself in need of support, there are national hotlines that you can call. We gave the number at the top of the episode. Don't hesitate to reach out. There's people who are here to help you, and you've got this.
You do.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you.